Emergency launch initiated.
Shoot for some air, that's cool.
Survival.
In the near future, the mining spaceship Borealis is flying silently across the vast emptiness of space. The entire crew, fast asleep in cryopods, awaiting a distant destination still 4 years away. But suddenly, an asteroid slams into the ship. Alarms blare as critical systems struggle to respond. In his pod, Andy jolts awake, greeted by a blurry video of his family. Just then, the ship's AI's voice pierces through the chaos. Survival system activated. Before he can fully understand what's happening, a flurry of robotic arms descend upon him, snapping together parts of a specialized suit. Then, the emergency launch initiates. Cryopods eject in every direction, scattering across the void. Most drift away safely, but a few aren't so lucky, snared in bursts of fire as explosions rip through sections of the Borealis. And suddenly, he's rocketing towards the closest planet. But as they enter the atmosphere, everything shifts. Gravity takes over, yanking them down at terrifying speeds. Andy's pod rattles and shakes, sparks flaring in the cockpit as fire streaks across the outer shell, thrusters malfunctioning, and then the pod slams against a rocky slope, scraping and grinding down until it finally stops, buried in a pile of dirt. Through blurred vision, Andy catches a flash of his family's faces, just before he snaps back into consciousness. His AI chimes in urgently, warning him about his heart rate. Defibrillators prepare to fire, but Andy cuts them off just in time. He tries the radio. No response. Then a shift, the pod moves. The AI warns him, unstable terrain detected, immediate evacuation advised. He braces himself, trying the hatch, nothing, jammed. Desperate, he digs through the survival kit. But there's no flare gun. His low rank meant he wasn't issued one. Cursing, he grabs the fire extinguisher and smashes it against the glass. Finally, it breaks, and Andy crawls out just as the pod tips sideways and drags him back in. The glass slices into his suit, oxygen leaking fast. Panic sets in as he scrambles for the repair spray, sealing the tear just in time. But now, a spark. The engine behind him bursts into flames. Coughing, he grabs his son's toy from the seat beside him and digs frantically through the smoky haze, clawing his way out. He looks up and sees it, the Borealis blazing as it spirals down through the sky, flames streaking behind until, boom! A massive explosion erupts as it crashes into the planet. He scrambles up, heart pounding, and asks his AI for information. The response is chilling. They only made it halfway to their destination, and he's stranded in unmapped territory. Then, a faint light in the distance. Desperate, Andy begins trudging toward it, calling out on the radio, but silence echoes back. After a long, exhausting walk, he stumbles upon half of the Borealis smoldering, flames licking up twisted metal. Nearby, he spots a damaged pod. He peers inside, hoping for supplies, and suddenly, a crewmate's body falls, lifeless and bloodied. Andy recoils, startled, his eyes darting to the oxygen tank, but it's damaged. With a shiver, he backs away, too shaken to notice the ominous slashes and blood across the pod. Minutes later, he finds SOS lights flickering in a whirlwind of fierce wind. Dwayne's there, assembling equipment he salvaged, already muttering grimly about rationing food, even talking about using meat from bodies. Dwayne tells him he found out, just before the crash, that the company rerouted the ship through an asteroid belt to save fuel. Now, they're marooned in unknown space. He's trying to send an SOS signal back to Earth, but it'll take 8 months to get there. And if rescue comes, that'll be 2 years at best. Andy's stomach drops. Hopelessness starts to creep in, but Dwayne tries to rally him, saying they could find survival resources in the other half of the ship. Andy steps back, mind racing, and suddenly, he unplugs the machine by accident. He turns to fix it, but just then, something lunges from the shadows. A creature grabs Dwayne, who vanishes in an instant, leaving no trace behind. Andy whips around, calling out, but he's alone. Heart pounding, he quickly sends the SOS message, then takes Dwayne's gun. AI, set a route to the largest Borealis piece, he orders, but the voice responds with a reminder, his oxygen's running low. With a knot in his gut, he starts walking, fingers nervously adjusting the radio as he searches for any sign of life. After what feels like forever, he reaches a cliff's edge. He shouts, his voice cracking with frustration. The AI pauses, then admits its systems are malfunctioning. And then static crackles on the radio. A voice breaks through. Hello, it's Naomi, another survivor. The signal is faint, barely there, so he paces wildly until he can hear her clearly. Naomi explains she's trapped in her pod and checked for others, but only he, Dwayne, and herself made it. She shares her location, but Andy's AI quickly warns. Her area is unstable, and Andy's oxygen might not last long enough to reach her. Heart pounding, he looks into the bleak horizon. Can he risk it? Andy hesitates, knowing the risk he's about to take, but Naomi's voice cuts through his doubts. Listen, I have enough oxygen for both of us. Just get here, she insists. After a deep breath, he decides to trust her and begins the trek. For hours, it's just him and Naomi, their voices keeping each other steady as he trudges through the alien terrain. But then, a strange noise echoes nearby. Andy stops, heart pounding, and quickly asks his AI to scan the area. Error, it chimes back. Great, he thinks. Naomi overhears and suddenly sounds tense. Another cost-cutting move from the company, anger simmering at the risk they've all been put in. Now night has fallen, and Andy is forced to slow down, his weak helmet lights barely piercing the darkness. He squints into the shadows and suddenly, he freezes, thinking he spotted movement. He shakes it off, blaming his imagination, but then he hears it, rocks rolling by his feet. His pulse quickens, hearing more noises now. Something is watching him, and it's close. Then, he spots strange small holes in the ground, leading to a larger gaping hole draped in webbing. His heart skips as he realizes the smaller holes are actually paw prints. A chill runs through him, and he picks up the pace, noting spider webs everywhere. As snow begins to fall, the noises morph into a low, menacing growl. He dives for cover, turning off his helmet lights. Naomi? He whispers frantically. There's something here. Naomi checks her scanner. Wait, I see a ton of crew trackers around you. They're moving toward you. Andy can't see anyone, but when the AI links to the trackers, they surround him, blipping closer on the screen. Suddenly, a flare lights up the sky, illuminating a massive spider-like creature lurking just a few feet away. Horror grips him as he realizes it's eaten the crew. Their trackers are still inside its stomach. He raises Dwayne's gun, but it jams. He screams, abandoning stealth and sprinting as the spider lunges, and he tumbles down, slamming against the rocky walls. Dazed, he looks up to see the creature breaking through the ceiling above, reaching in with sharp, slicing legs. He bolts, adrenaline fueling every step as it slashes through the dirt, narrowly missing him. Andy dodges, but in his terror, he misses the edge of a cliff and goes tumbling down. The fall is brutal, but thankfully the snow cushions his impact. He lies still, winded, as the creature's roar echoes above. Naomi's voice crackles over the radio. Andy, your oxygen levels are plummeting. The fall tore his suit. He fumbles for the repair spray, sealing the tear just as his last breath escapes. Finally, he manages to close it, though he's used every last drop of spray. His breathing slows, relief flooding over him. Just then, Dwayne's frantic voice bursts over the radio. Help, I'm under attack. Naomi immediately urges Andy to go, but he hesitates. His scanner barely works, but Naomi's voice cuts through. Dwayne still has oxygen, Andy. You need it. That's all he needs to hear. Andy sprints through the wreckage, dodging fallen pods. Following the trail of flares, Dwayne is shooting up into the night. Finally, he spots him. Just as Dwayne tries to shout out the creature's weakness, it attacks again, cutting his voice off in a horrifying scream. Andy freezes, listening helplessly over the radio as Dwayne's final cries fade to silence. Panicked, he ducks behind another pod, only to find another monster close by, tearing into the bodies scattered around. In the meantime, Naomi cleverly activates the AI voice and lights in a nearby pod, diverting the creature's attention. Andy seizes the chance, darting to hide inside another pod. Naomi accidentally turns on his pod lights, but before the creatures catch on, Naomi quickly activates all the pods, drawing them away and giving Andy a precious moment to escape. He runs, but soon hears the heavy footsteps behind him. The creatures are catching on, starting to follow again. Just when it feels like they're too close, he stumbles into a dense, foggy area. The spiders halt, hesitating, and then disappear into the mist. Naomi, you need to find cover too, he says, his voice trembling. She's silent for a second, then whispers, I can't feel my legs. Panic floods her voice, and Andy recognizes the onset of a panic attack. Trying to steady her, he begins softly singing the lullaby he used to sing to his son. Her breathing slows, her voice steadies. Thank you, she murmurs. Relieved, he trudges on until he's met with a surreal scene. A swarm of glowing fireflies flitting around, creating an ethereal display. He pauses, almost in awe, as one firefly lands on his helmet. But then, it turns red, striking at him with a tiny bite. But then, all the fireflies turn red, swarming to attack him together. He breaks into a run, managing to shake them off, but a new growling sound chills him. The fireflies scatter, and suddenly, the ground splits open. A massive mouth lunges from below, swallowing him whole in seconds. Andy is paralyzed, trapped in a sticky, vile substance coating him inside the creature's mouth. It begins swallowing him slowly, inch by inch. Desperately, he remembers his AI. Heart attack! The defibrillator kicks in, sending an electric shock so intense it forces the creature to spit him out, dazed and disoriented. And Andy scrambles to hide, spotting a hollowed-out tree trunk. He jumps inside, but the ground gives way and he tumbles down a hole. straight into a nest of fireflies. The creatures instantly turn red, swarming him again, and he dashes through the tunnel, emerging only when he's finally left the nest behind. Panting, he steadies himself as the AI's voice cuts through. Warning, oxygen levels critically low. Estimated supply will reach the Borealis, but insufficient to reach Naomi. Andy's heart sinks. Naomi sighs softly over the radio. It's okay, Andy. You need to make it to the ship. Andy refuses to give up. He keeps running, charging through the heat, surrounded by flames from the crash, barely able to breathe. His lungs are screaming, every gasp a struggle. He stumbles, nearly falling, but somehow gathers the strength to push through. He forces himself forward, desperate, and finally he spots Naomi in her pod. Relief floods him as she opens the door, and he climbs inside, gulping in the clean, cool air. But there's no time to waste. He grabs her leg, trying to pull her free. But his hands, they're not strong enough. Panic claws at him until he spots her emergency kit. Her kit has tools. He grabs one and finally manages to get her unstuck. She gasps, wincing as he frees her leg. After a quick rest, the two grab a flare gun and some repair spray, ready to keep going. Naomi struggles to walk, so Andy quickly improvises a splint. It's not perfect, but it'll do. As they set off, Naomi inspects Dwayne's gun, her expression darkening. Before they can move, a horde of creatures is closing in. Run! Naomi yells, and they both take off, adrenaline drowning out the pain in her leg, hearts pounding toward the other half of the Borealis. They finally make it, gasping and scramble to go faster, sliding down debris with the creatures in hot pursuit. But the creatures keep coming. One nearly lunges at them when Naomi fires the flare gun, sending it skittering after the light. She fires another one, managing to distract a second monster. They run up the hill, bursting into the Borealis just in time, but Naomi struggles with the control panel, pounding buttons as the creatures claw closer. Finally, she manages to slam the door shut, crushing one of the monsters as it tries to squeeze through. Panting, they listen as the creatures begin pounding on the door, but it holds. Inside, there's damage, but the lights are still on, meaning the backup generator is intact. They spot supplies in the cargo hold and the atmosphere's stable. They can survive here, at least for a while. As they move through a corridor, a dark trail catches Andy's eye. When they reach the main console, Andy freezes. The console is covered in blood, guts, and cobwebs. Suddenly, a large creature stalks into view, its grotesque stomach gaping open as it drops human remains onto the floor. Andy's stomach lurches. He clamps a hand over his mouth, swallowing hard. He can't throw up now. The creature finally leaves, and Andy exhales in relief. But as they try to move, they look up just as a hatch opens, and an even bigger monster drops down. Heart racing, Andy slams the door shut, locking them in. Naomi stares at him in horror. She snaps, her voice shaking. We're stuck in the airlock. Outside, the creature slams against the right door, metal screeching. Andy desperately pounds on the left door with his tool, but it's useless. Andy sighs, pulling out a video of his family. As it plays, his voice trembles. They died in a car crash. I live with that guilt every day. Naomi places a hand on his shoulder, her voice soft but firm. I'm alive because of you. You saved me. They sit in silence, hugging each other, convinced it's over. But then Naomi notices something strange. A tiny, glowing orb stuck to Andy's suit, full of fireflies. Suddenly, the spider crashes through the door. They hurl the orb, and the fireflies swarm the creature, sending it scurrying back. They hit a button on the main panel, opening another door, and take off toward the cargo bay. But when they get there, they stop short. They're on an elevated platform. The spider shakes off the fireflies and charges after them. Naomi calls, and they leap down, hitting the cargo bay floor as the spider lands beside them. With a growl, it lunges again, but Andy throws his repair spray right into its mouth. The creature snaps it up, it explodes, buying them precious seconds to run. The spider crawls onto the ceiling, moving faster than ever. They stumble as it lands right behind them. Naomi springs to her feet, shouting, I'll distract it! Andy, you have to figure out how to kill it. As she runs, Andy spots some cargo pods and has an idea. His AI directs him to one at the top of the bay, so he scrambles up until he reaches the top platform. Just as he gets there, he sees Naomi struck by the spider's claws, flung to the floor. Thinking quickly, Andy shuts off the lights, leaving Naomi in darkness. She scrambles into a crate and finds emergency lights. Meanwhile, Andy tries to eject the pod, but the AI stops him. Powers down, manual override only, climbing inside and connecting his AI to it. As he glances at his son's toy, his voice cracks. He takes a breath, steeling himself, waiting for just the right moment. The spider zeroes in on Naomi, drawn to her glowing lights. Andy launches the pod with a surge of adrenaline, crashing it down onto the monster below. The impact shakes the bay as the spider lets out a final screech. Naomi rushes to the wreckage, tears streaming. She begs until finally Andy stirs, alive. She laughs through her tears, pulling him to his feet. They walk to the window together, watching the sunrise, hand in hand, just grateful to be alive. And if you enjoyed this story, remember to subscribe and hit the like button. Leave a comment with any requests, and until next time, take care.